See how masturbation is silently destroying your soul. Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle you can't escape? An inner silent struggle that consumes your peace and weakens your connection with God? There are battles that are not fought before the eyes of the world, but within the heart. And often, the enemy is not outside but within us, in the small concessions, in habits that seem harmless, but gradually corrode our soul. Masturbation is one of those challenges. It presents itself as a false promise of pleasure, but in reality, it weakens your spirit, distorts your view of purity, and destroys something much more valuable than you imagine. Christ taught us that our mind and heart are sacred temples. What we allow to dwell within us defines our spiritual journey, but the world teaches us the opposite, that immediate pleasure is more important than discipline, that uncontrollable desires are part of human nature, and that giving in to them is normal. However, what few realize is that every time we give in, we are giving up something greater. True freedom is not in doing what we want at the moment, but in mastering our desires to live according to what God wants for us. And if this battle has been difficult for you, know that there is a way out. And it begins with a deep understanding of what is happening within your soul. In this video, we will explore how this seemingly harmless habit may be distancing you from God's presence, weakening your faith, and destroying your ability to fully live the purpose He has for your life. We will discuss the spiritual traps behind this behavior, the effects it causes on your mind and heart, and above all, how Jesus Christ taught us to overcome this struggle. It's not about guilt, condemnation, or fear, but a real opportunity for transformation and liberation. But before we continue, I want you to ask yourself, what has masturbation taken from you? Your peace, your willpower, your intimacy with God? What would happen if you decided to fight against it and free yourself once and for all? If these questions have already stirred something within you, then stay with me until the end of this video. What you will discover here can change your life in a way you never imagined. So, if you feel that this struggle has been your reality, know that there is hope. Christ calls us to something greater, to a path of purity, self-control, and restoration. And today, together, we will understand how to take the first step towards this liberation. Now let's dive deep into this truth that can transform your soul. The invisible trap. Have you noticed how certain habits start small, almost insignificant, but gradually take on enormous proportions within us? Masturbation is one of those subtle bonds, a practice that the world has normalized, but which, spiritually, may be imprisoning you without you realizing it. The problem is not just in the act itself, but in how it shapes your mind, your emotions, and your relationship with God. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus teaches that sin does not begin in action, but in the heart and thoughts. He says, "Anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Matthew 5:28. This means that it is not just the big falls that distance us from God, but the small daily deviations, the thoughts we feed, and the concessions we make. Masturbation hides in privacy, in solitude, in the silence of the night when no one is looking. But God sees. He sees your heart, your struggle, your attempts to stop, and your moments of weakness. The enemy wants you to believe that this doesn't matter, that there are no consequences. But what he doesn't tell you is that every time you give in, you are distancing yourself a little more from the purpose God has for your life. You feel it, don't you? The loss of peace, the guilt that comes afterward, the feeling that something inside you is being corrupted. And it's not just about the spiritual issue. Scientifically, we know that the excessive and uncontrolled pleasure caused by masturbation can addict the brain, making it less sensitive to true sources of happiness and fulfillment. Over time, this habit can undermine your willpower, weaken your discipline, and even affect how you view relationships and purity. But Christ came to liberate, not to condemn. He wants to open your eyes to this reality and give you the weapons to win this battle. Now, stop and think. Is this habit really bringing you happiness? Or is it stealing your energy, your motivation, and your connection with God? The answer is within you. The good news is that Jesus never leaves us to fight alone. He has already overcome sin and given us the path to true freedom. But this journey requires a decision from you. Today, you have the opportunity to see beyond the lie the world has told you. You don't have to be a slave to this cycle. You were not created to live chained to fleeting desires. There is something greater reserved for you. Something that can only be lived when you decide to break this chain and surrender completely to God's plan. The deconstruction of purity. Perhaps you have thought, but I'm not hurting anyone. It's just something personal. This is the illusion that traps so many people in this cycle. Sin never remains confined to just one isolated act. It always affects other areas of life. Masturbation not only destroys your intimacy with God, but also distorts how you view love, sexuality, and holiness. Jesus taught us that purity is not just about avoiding wrong actions, but about guarding the heart from everything that diverts us from God's presence. And masturbation never comes alone. It is always accompanied by thoughts, fantasies, and content that feed the flesh and distance the spirit. At first, it may seem like just a way to relieve desire, but over time, it becomes a need that dominates the mind. You begin to realize that you can no longer control your thoughts. They arise at any moment, undermining your concentration, your focus, and even your self-esteem. The enemy works strategically. He wants you to believe that this is normal, that everyone does it, that there is nothing wrong. But have you ever wondered why, even believing this, you still feel a weight within you? The truth is that we were created for something greater. God designed us to live in holiness, to channel our energy into things that build us up, that bring us closer to Him, and that make us grow spiritually. The problem is not just the physical act, but what it is doing to your soul. Masturbation creates a vicious cycle where desire is never fully satisfied. You always want more. You always feel that something is missing. And do you know why? Because your heart was not made to be filled by fleeting pleasures, but by the presence of God. That's why so many people struggle, fall, repent, and fall again. Because they are trying to fight alone, with their own strength. But Christ said, "Apart from me, you can do nothing." John 15:5. If you want to win this battle, you must understand that the strength is not in you, but in Him. Only through Him is it possible to free yourself and find a new path. The impact on your spiritual life. Now think about your prayer life. How has your communion with God been? Do you feel the same connection as before, or do you sense that something is preventing you from getting closer? Often, sin distances us from prayer because we feel unworthy, ashamed, unable to look at God without guilt. Jesus never rejected those who sought purity of heart. He does not want you to hide, but to bring this struggle into the light. Sin gains strength in secrecy, but loses power when confessed and exposed before God. He said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. If this struggle has been a burden, He wants to carry it with you. But for that, you need to decide. Decide that you no longer want to live trapped in a habit that distances you from God. Decide that your spiritual life is worth more than a few moments of pleasure. Decide that you do not need to carry this battle alone. Today, God is calling you to change. He wants to restore your mind, your purity, and your connection with Him. But this transformation only happens when you allow Him to work in you. Are you willing to take this step? The path to liberation. True liberation begins with a willing heart. Jesus does not ask for perfection, but for surrender. He wants you to recognize your weakness, but trust that He can transform your story. If this struggle has been constant in your life, know that there are strategies that can help you overcome it. First, feed your spirit more than your flesh. If you spend hours consuming content that arouses desires but only a few minutes in prayer, who are you strengthening? Seek to strengthen your communion with God. Read the Word, fast, and seek to be surrounded by influences that bring you closer to Him. Second, avoid triggers. If you know that certain music, videos, or even thoughts are the beginning of the cycle, eliminate them from your routine. Replace what distances you from God with what brings you closer. Finally, trust God to renew your mind. Transformation begins in thought. When temptation comes, bring your mind to Christ. Declare the word, pray, and remember that you are not alone in this fight. The call to a new life. Now, the decision is in your hands. You can continue living in this cycle, or you can choose the freedom that Jesus offers. The question is, what do you really desire for your life? If your answer is a lighter, holier, and closer life to God, then today is the day to take this step. God has something greater for you. He calls you to a life of fullness, purpose, and true joy. The choice is yours. The choice is in your hands. Now that we have reached the end of this deep conversation, I want you to pause for a moment and look within yourself. What did you feel throughout this video? Perhaps discomfort, perhaps awakening, perhaps a confirmation of what, deep down, you already knew. This habit has been a burden in your life, a weight you no longer need to carry. But I want you to understand something essential. God did not call you to live trapped, chained by fleeting impulses. He created you for freedom, for a life of fullness and true connection with Him. Masturbation may seem like just a detail in the midst of it all, but it has a profound impact on your soul. The question is, how long will you allow this to distance you from the greater purpose God has for you? Jesus never said it would be easy, but He guaranteed it would be worth it. He taught us that true strength lies in surrender, in self-control, in the conscious choice to live in holiness. Perhaps you have tried to stop before and failed. Perhaps guilt and shame have prevented you from seeking help. But today is a new day. God does not look at you with condemnation, but with love. He extends His hand to you and says, "Rise and walk." This is your moment to start over, to take a firm step towards your liberation. The decision you make today can completely change your spiritual journey. Now, I want to leave you with a powerful reflection. Imagine yourself a year from now, free from this struggle. Imagine a clear mind, a peaceful heart, a deep connection with God, without that weight that haunts you. What would your life be like? What would your prayers be like? Your faith? Your relationship with God? This vision does not have to be a distant dream. It can begin now with a choice. The choice to say no to what enslaves you and yes to what strengthens you. Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. Today, this truth has been revealed to you. What will you do with it? If this video spoke to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this message because there may be someone going through the same battle, needing to hear this truth. Leave your comment below. Tell me what you think about this, or even share your experience. Let's build together a space of support, growth, and transformation. And of course, if you want to continue receiving content that brings you closer to God and helps you overcome daily battles, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we are together on this journey. May God strengthen and guide your steps. Remember, your identity is not in your weakness, but in the power God has to transform your life. And this transformation begins now. Are you ready? Then let's go together. Until the next video.